Coming up on this episode of In Discussion, WUOW's Gary Wickham sits down with producer and director Josh Fox to talk about his award-winning documentary, Gasland, and the issues New York State residents face on the issues of natural gas drilling.
Welcome to In Discussion, a public affairs presentation of SUNY Oneonta. My name is Gary Wickham, and my guest today is Josh Fox, the Academy Award-nominated director of Gasland. Josh, welcome.
Thanks.
Here's a little preview of what Gasland is all about.
Filmmaker Josh Fox received a letter in the mail offering him $100,000 for permission to drill for natural gas on his land. He knew that in 2005, Congress had passed a bill exempting gas companies from environmental regulations. He wanted to know what impact the drilling would have on his land, so he took his camera across the United States to discover the truth about hydraulic fracturing.
The method of gas drilling they use is called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. It blasts a mix of water and chemicals 8,000 feet into the ground. The fracking itself is like a mini earthquake. The intense pressure breaks apart the rock and frees up the gas.
6 states have documented over 1,000 incidents of groundwater contamination.
It bubbles and hisses when it comes out. I won't drink it.
They can drill whether we like it or not.
It's a free-for-all. Our water was good before they started drilling. Then when they got done, it was bad.
Obviously, we have a problem here.
The Colorado Oil and Gas Commission is aware of the situation and will probably be doing some additional testing in the area as soon as possible.
There has been concern raised about the methods to tap these valuable resources. They have been characterized as environmentally risky and inadequately regulated. Such reports are not accurate.
The neurological effects are very insidious.
Everybody was sick, including me. I have these lesions in my brain.
You get pains all over your body.
If you weren't able to do this hydraulic fracturing, how much more would we be dependent on foreign oil and terrorism?
I have one quote here from you that says that you're trying to do this in a way that doesn't damage the environment. But you also said recently that water contamination is inevitable.
Well, yeah, I mean...
are those contradictory, or...?
Despite documented health risks and environmental impact, hydraulic fracturing is spreading across the globe.
It's amazing that what took Mother Nature millions of years to build can be destroyed in a few hours with a piece of heavy machinery.
What it's doing is searching for a problem that does not exist.
Whoa, Jesus Christ.
It's not supposed to do that.
Wow. Josh Fox, our guest, again, the Academy Award-nominated director of Gasland. Your first experience with documentaries, in a way, and you get an Academy Award nomination. What's that like?
Well, it was the first film that I've made as a straight documentary, but I've actually made plays for about 15 years with my company called International WUOW Company, same producing company of the film. And so I was used to interviewing people, and I'd made one previous feature film, so I was in the process of sort of figuring out what that was about. I think that, you know, the film has been incredibly popular, and that's great. I think the reason why, there are a lot of reasons why, but one of the main reasons why is because this problem is happening so many places. We're in the middle of the largest natural gas drilling campaign in domestic history. It's going on in 34 states. And the reason I got involved is because the gas industry started to come into the upper Delaware River Basin, where I live. And I'm on the Pennsylvania side, but it's right on the border of Pennsylvania and New York. And there's this massive proposal to drill 50% of New York State, 65% of Pennsylvania, hundreds of thousands of gas wells, which would be transformative of both of those states, and affect major population centers, including New York City, Philadelphia, southern New Jersey, in terms of where they get their water from, and Pittsburgh. And so you've got a raging debate that's going on statewide, region-wide, nationwide, and now internationally, because this same kind of proposal for fracking, hydraulic fracturing, as you saw explained in the trailer, is across the world. So you're talking about a huge investment of ExxonMobil in German fracking, $40 billion in Germany, shale gas in France, all throughout Australia, Indonesia, China. The whole world is looking at this form of natural gas exploration, and what I found in my trip across America was that the process was inherently contaminating, incredibly problematic in terms of accidents. They're injecting these toxic chemicals under the ground. They're turning up in people's water supplies. It is a civil rights issue because people's basic control over their daily life, over their land, over their health is thrown completely out of control. And you have these multi-billion-dollar industries essentially bearing down on millions of people and trying to take over that territory for this industrialization project. So it's, you know, I'm obviously the film, people like it, but at the same time it's because there are millions of people who literally have skin in the game, who are living in those territories, who now are forced with this huge crisis.
You, well, I don't know what your knowledge was ahead of gas drilling, but basically you got a lease in the mail.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it. You know, we received a number of different notifications that were asking. It wasn't just us; I mean, it was everybody. It was the whole. I mean, people here know all about this.
Yeah.
This is happening all over the southern tier of New York. It's all happening all over this area. And you know, when it first came through, it was my father looked at this and he said, "This looks insane. This has got to be a scam. Will you just look into this for me?" You know, he hands me this letter, and I started to look at it, and then I was actually going door to door, volunteering for Obama at that time, presidential candidate Obama in the Democratic primary in Pennsylvania, April of 2008. So I was knocking on a lot of doors. Just basically, I'd never gone out for a political candidate before, but I was you know, supporting Obama very, very passionately, and you know, door after door after door after door, asking me about gas drilling. What are they saying about gas drilling? I was saying, what is going on here? And I realized that it was it was everyone in the county. It was 65% of the state. And that neighbors of mine had looked into the process, and they you know, in their internet research, they hadn't found a lot that was online in terms of anything that was on television or any video, but they did find articles that said, you know, this is a process that people have been complaining about out west. There's toxic chemicals involved. Looks like a huge land scarring project. And here we are, you know, in the Delaware River Basin. This is a watershed area. This is a recreational area. This is a pristine river basin that has never seen that kind of industrialization proposal. So immediately it was of concern, and then I started to interview people. I figured, you know, I've been making plays for many years, interviewing actors from different countries and actors from different walks of life. I just did a series of collaborations with returned veterans from Iraq, where I interviewed them and essentially pulled their stories and put them into one into a movie and one into a play. So I was getting involved with that kind of work, and I thought, you know, I should start shooting this. I went to Dimmock, which is a nearby town, 60 miles away from me, and found the whole place completely upended. Water contamination, air pollution, people who, you know, their children were getting sick, their animals were getting sick, and then a group of people who could light their water on fire. And I thought, you know, I got home and I thought, I have to find out if this is the same thing that's happening across America as is happening in Dimmock, or is it some kind of exception? And I found that this was par for the course. These companies would come in, be all sweetness and light on their way in the door, tell you that everything's going to be fine, you're going to make lots and lots of money, and then leave this trail of destruction in their wake where you have Halliburton trucks swarming all over the place, drilling rigs everywhere, water goes bad, chemicals that are spilled or leak or leach into the ground or are actually coming from the fracking itself, that there's been no investigation into this untested form of drilling on behalf of the federal government ever. And yet they've unleashed, you know, they're talking about drilling 30,000 wells a year all across the United States. And that the gas industry had petitioned with the federal government to get themselves exempted from the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which is our act that monitors underground injection of chemicals, of toxins. And this, in fact, is a process that injects millions of gallons, billions of gallons of toxins under the ground when you see it cumulatively. They managed to find their way out of the very law that was designed to protect people from this kind of activity. So these were all big red flags. I took the footage back to friends of mine. They said, what have you uncovered here? You've got the inconvenient truth on your hands. You've got something very huge. You've got to make this a priority and go across the country and investigate further.
And obviously you did. You mentioned in the film that you were offered $4,800, maybe $4,700 and change an acre for your land.
Yeah.
Was that a pretty standard figure?
Well, the rates varied depending on who you were talking to in New York and in Pennsylvania. The lease that eventually we got, you know, it came down after a little while, then it went back up. It was all over. There were a lot of different offers. The current thing that the people in my neighborhood or my county, the Northern Wayne Property Owners Alliance, signed, I believe, was something in the average of $3,500 an acre, plus a drilling bonus of $15,000, plus additional road acre usage, which would bring the number close to what what was quoted in the film. You know, so we had signed with that lease, which we were listed with. I mean, the lease, all that stuff happened before, and then actually once the film was done, the leases were then signed. They signed 80,000 acres. But it would have brought us in at around $91,000 instead of 92. So there are a lot of ways into this question, but there were also, you know, I mean, the way that these companies come in and lease is they lease based on what they think people will go for, not what it's worth. In Dimmock, they were signing people up for $50 an acre.
And we hear these same stories up here where people are so desperate, can't pay the taxes, willing to sign for $50 an acre, where the neighbor may get $500 or $1,000 an acre. So apparently, whatever the market will bear, sort of in the reverse way.
Well, yeah, I mean, their job is to get it signed as fast as possible, with as few questions as possible, for as little money as they can get, or for as little money as they can get people to sign for. So in the case of Pat Fornelli, who's the first person we interviewed in the film, she was offered exactly what she needed to make her mortgage payment the next month, and
so that's researched obviously ahead of time, but
I don't know, but it's funny. I don't know that for a fact. What I do know is that recently in Ohio there was a whole landman's handbook for like talking points, which was really damning, and it's out there on the internet. People can find it. You just research. It was posted on Tree Hugger, and it's being verified right now. And I have talked to several people around there who said, yeah, absolutely, this was an actual landman's handbook. And what it says was, emphasize political points, talk about how China is ahead of the United States, downplay any problems with contamination, never talk about the Safe Drinking Water Act exemption, distance your position from the film Gasland. Don't let people know that what we're actually doing is slick water hydraulic fracturing. It's really clear that they're in the business of deceiving people. And that's the way I feel. I feel like this gas industry is lying through their teeth, and that in fact their business is based on a lie. When they come to your front door, they will tell you, it says a fire hydrant in the middle of your field. The people in Dimmock were told that we might not even drill. This is just, a formality. You should just take this $500. And all of a sudden their whole town gets taken over. They're not being upfront or above board on what chemicals they're using. They're not being upfront or above board about how much money people were going to make, because also people in Dimmock reported that they made a fraction of what they were promised, a tenth of what they were promised, and here they are, their property value has been completely destroyed. And they're definitely not giving you the whole story about contamination. They've been out there denying that the film Gasland is true. They've been out there denying that the reports, front page reports for the New York Times, which indicate contamination and wastewater that's going all over the place, they challenged it. They said that was not true. They also challenged ProPublica, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism website. They tried to debunk them. So this is an industry in full-on denial mode. And yet all across the nation, there are people who are actually getting the real information, not just from the film Gasland, but from what they read in the papers and from their neighbors. I mean, you're so close here to Dimmock, you're so close here to Bradford County. I would challenge anybody who is thinking that this industry can operate responsibly to go down to Bradford County, to go to Susquehanna County and see for themselves and talk to the people on the ground themselves.
If I own 20 acres next door to you, and I sign a lease and you don't, what obviously the problems are in the ground, in the shale formation, and if they frack on my land, obviously it affects you.
Well, public health and safety, in this case, trumps landowners' rights, in my opinion, and not just my opinion. Water doesn't obey those property lines. Air doesn't obey those property lines. Quality of life often also doesn't obey those property lines. Another thing that happens, the scenario that you just outlined is exactly the scenario I'm in. I have not leased. The people right across the stream from me have. That means that I can't sell my house. Now I am adjacent and I abut to an industrial zone. So if I'm living next to an industrial zone, I cannot get financing from the bank. That is happening all across New York State, all across Pennsylvania. The gas industry, by leasing, by signing these leases, have drained the real estate value out of the state. So I'm in that exact situation. Now I know if I look out off my front porch and I see a drilling rig, if they do permit wells in the Delaware River Basin, which we're opposing, trying to get them to stop any further exploration or gas drilling in the river basin, as we are throughout New York State and throughout Pennsylvania. The volatile organic compounds that are coming off of those well sites, benzene, toluene, xylene, unregulated emissions, methane itself, will cloud through that valley that I live in and make the area very dangerous to live in. That is, without a doubt, 100% a certainty that where there is gas drilling, there is very significant air contamination, air pollution, and hazardous air, what they call hazardous air pollutants, that are very, very dangerous to human health, including benzene and methane and toluene and all these others, which cause brain damage, which are known carcinogens, and they vent off the sites, every one of these sites, because they're not regulated under the Clean Air Act. That says nothing of the water contamination possibility. The pits that are used, the spills, the 24-hour noise and truck traffic and light pollution, all of those things add up to a very toxic situation, a situation where your quality of life has been degraded to such a degree that most people I know, and people I've shot in the film, and a lot of people who have been seen on this 130-city tour, are contemplating move. Just walk away from their properties, not be able to sell their property, lose all the value in their house. And most people in America have most of their value tied up in their house and their mortgage. Just walk away because their children are getting sick, because they can't take it anymore, because they're fearing for their health.
Before I move off this subject of the leases,
sure.
And you're offered again at figure 47 or whatever it was, and let's just say for the sake of argument, you do lease and I lease, but they drill on your land and not my land. Does everybody get a royalty? Can they park trucks on my land, not pay me anything?
It depends on the conditions of the lease. I mean, if they're drilling under you, it really would depend on the condition of your individual lease. Some of the leases have clauses that say, yes, you can put equipment on my land. Some of them have no use for the surface. I don't know.
They were kind of tailored to whatever they thought they could sell.
Well, it depends on whether or not you entered into that negotiation with a lawyer, or if you negotiated at all. The leases, some of the time, will put I've seen leases where the actual equipment that the gas company uses is then owned by the leasee, which means you own the contamination and the pollution. You own their separators, you own their condensate tanks, you own all that stuff. So when they pack up and leave, it's your job to get rid of those things.
Good luck. Now you're in Wayne County, is that?
Wayne County, PA. Yeah.
And again, obviously, we're looking at Pennsylvania laws that regulate this, and apparently there isn't many. How about local land use laws?
In Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, well, you mentioned it's an industrial zone.
Well, yeah, this has been a big problem. Our town board in Damascus, zoning board, met to rezone the town for industrial use. Every one of the people on that town board have leased their land. In my mind, that is a conflict of interest. You cannot pass a law where you make money off of that law. That is a conflict of interest. It's a classic conflict of interest. Every single one of those town board members should have recused themselves. Every single one of them should have stepped out and said, you know what, I've got a horse in this race. I can't make an impartial decision on this. They didn't do it.
Wow.
Well, that's happening all across New York and all across Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. That is one of the ways in which I would allege that this is a kind of a corrupt activity. Because if you stand to make money off of that, you should not be writing the laws for everybody else.
And in terms of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, what help have they been?
Well, in my area, we haven't had drilling apart from a few exploratory wells.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at Dimick.
Well, the regime has changed quite a bit since Tom Corbett took over in PA. From what I understand now, Tom Corbett took the permitting process out of the hands of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. I don't know as much about what they're doing now as what they did during the Rendell administration, which was also there were frequent complaints of PA DEP coming in arm in arm with Cabot Oil and Gas to test water. DEP telling residents, "Oh, the water is fine," and then residents saying, "All right, well, have a glass."
Here, drink some.
And they don't want to have it, and that's right there in the movie that they won't drink it. John Hanger himself, the head of the PA DEP, wouldn't drink it. He appeared in the film. He wasn't happy with the way he appeared in the film, but order came from Ed Rendell to replace Dimick's water, the contaminated water, with a municipal water line. 18 families who had their water contaminated by Cabot, John Hanger and the DEP had a very strong case against them. And the governor said, all right, well, it's in the Pennsylvania Constitution. It's common sense. You've got to replace these people's water. $12 million for a pipeline from 7 miles away from the closest municipal source to bring those 18 families water.
Wow.
That's what the price of this contamination is and will be for the state of New York, for the state of Pennsylvania, if they allow drilling in New York, if they continue to drill like they've been doing it in Pennsylvania. It's far in excess of what the value of the gas in the short term. Because if you have, and so then what happened was Cabot Oil and Gas challenged that. They ran full-page articles in the newspapers all around, isolated those people, created an AstroTurf group called Enough Already, basically threatened local businesses with pulling out, and you're going to lose all the business that's come into your diner, into your hotel. And they held an information session about how Cabot had not actually contaminated the water. Essentially, Cabot said, you know what, PA, we're more powerful than you, the government. We're going to challenge this. Eventually, what ended up happening was John Hanger entered into a negotiation, backdoor negotiation, without consulting the residents, and made a settlement agreement with Cabot, and the residents were very, very unhappy with that. But the water line still may very well be installed, or have to be installed.
At whose expense?
Well, initially, it was the taxpayers' expense. But the state of Pennsylvania was going to sue the company, Cabot Oil and Gas, for the cost of the pipeline. Of course, none of this is now happening now because of the Corbett administration's change in policy.
As you were watching, obviously in the beginning of the film and near the end of the film, we see congressional testimony. What's going through your mind as you're watching these guys literally sell this to?
I couldn't believe we were in there. You know, at that time, that was the House panel, Subcommittee on Energy and Minerals. 4 out of 5 panelists were pro-fracking. I went to a Senate hearing 2 weeks ago. 3 out of 5 were against doing it in the way that they're doing it now. In other words, they were for the FRAC Act, for re-regulating the process under the Safe Drinking Water Act. That, in one sense, is progress, because word has gotten around. But it was really remarkable, having had the experience that I had traveling around the country, watching all of these contamination cases, and hear them say the thousands of contamination cases that have been reported by websites. They don't mention that it's ProPublica, a Pulitzer Prize-winning, very highly respected source of journalism, are inaccurate. And to me, I thought, well, all right, do these congressmen and women know, have they had the experience I have? Can they see this from the ground level? Have they been out there? And some of them luckily had been. Diana DeGette and Maurice Hinchey. Diana DeGette, Congresswoman from Colorado, very tough, knows her constituency, knows what's going on out there. Maurice Hinchey has experience for years knowing that industrial drilling for fossil fuels contaminates water supplies, and was out there really as a champion. And Maurice Hinchey should be credited with doing quite a lot for this surrounding area, and also the New York City watershed, where he's a congressman, to protect it.
Weston Williams?
Wilson
appears in your film.
Yeah.
And how powerful is that statement that he made?
Mind-blowing. Here's a guy from the EPA. In 2004, EPA investigated hydraulic fracturing because of complaints that were happening all across the country. They took a look at this investigation. This was under the Bush administration. They took a look at it. They said, yep, this process is toxic. Yes, these are toxins. Yes, they're being injected under the ground. And no, we don't need to regulate it. He looked at it and he said, this is like being in the government of George Orwell, you know. I mean, or in 1984. Yes. And he blew the whistle on it. He said, this conclusion makes no sense. You just admitted within the body of the report that there's something really wrong here. So, and that was, Wes Wilson wasn't the only person to point that out. Henry Waxman pointed it out. So he stuck his neck out. He was close to retirement. He blew the whistle on the report, writing a letter to Congress saying this is nonsense. And lo and behold, there was a peer review panel. Every EPA study has to be peer reviewed. But that peer review panel, 5 out of 7 members were members of the gas industry.
Wow.
So when you have the gas industry writing the EPA report, you have a problem. When you have the people who have leased designing your town zoning laws saying that it's totally okay for this residential area that you've spent your life in, making beautiful and working on and living in and loving, can now all of a sudden be rezoned as an industrial zone because they are making money off of that. You've got the same kind of problem.
Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on the Natural Gas Alliance, which has put out a lot of information refuting Gasland, to include talking about the fish kill and disputing your you're disputing some of the things in the film. Yeah,
the Natural Gas Alliance is trying to make money and trying to promote their product, and they're absolutely 100% lying about what's going on in the film. It's a misinformation campaign. It's a smear campaign. We address it directly, every single point that they put out at our film, at our website, gaslandthemovie.com. But I'll go into a couple of things, because you did mention Dunker Creek. The investigation into Dunker Creek is ongoing. Now, the gas industry is saying, okay, well, it was acid mine and drainage from coal mines. But in fact, it was gas drilling waste that was being dumped down those coal mines that was leaching out into the stream, and they've shown that. That's gas drilling waste. So the coal industry is blaming the gas industry is blaming the coal industry. The truth is, it's right there in the middle, and it deserves to be included in Gasland. The other thing that the gas industry is saying is that, those people could light their water on fire before we got there. What they're ignoring is that there are confirmed cases in the film Gasland, all in the same proximity of this one area, that were confirmed by COGCC as thermogenic methane, and they ruled that it was the cause was natural gas drilling. We have the report. It's a later report than the one that Anga likes to cite. They cite the earlier report. This is like the witches in Macbeth. You know, they tell Macbeth he's going to be the king. They tell you one little thing that's true, and that conceals the much greater lie at work here. They don't tell him that he's going to have to kill all these people and that he's going to be dead after 2 days. But this is what the Gas Alliance is doing. They're saying, oh, well, there was a report that showed this was biogenic methane. Well, gas drilling can liberate both biogenic methane and thermogenic methane. They leave that out. They leave out the fact that across the street, the people who are also in the film lighting their water on fire was confirmed by COGCC as thermogenic methane. They leave that out. They also leave out the fact that COGCC, nor the gas industry, nor anybody, ever actually investigated the migratory pathway from where the gas came from into the aquifer. So in both cases, whether you label it thermogenic or biogenic, they're speculating. What I'm doing as a journalist is asking the question, what's happening here? Why is it that in every gas drilling area, all of a sudden people can light their water on fire where they never could before? Why are these chemicals that are frac fluids that could not have gotten into the water supply any other way but by some kind of communication between the gas wells and the aquifer getting into people's aquifers? That is question, that is science. And you have to disprove a scientific hypothesis for it to not be true. The scientific hypothesis of the film is here are all these cases where you see the water contamination. The gas industry has never submitted itself to a rigorous test. They've never proven that it's safe. Until they can tell us that it's safe, they shouldn't be doing this. It's an open experiment on the American people. If it was a form of prescription drug, you wouldn't take it unless it was tested and certified by the FDA. Well, that's exactly what's happening with gas drilling in the water supply.
Our time has flown, Josh, and we could do this for another hour, I'm sure.
Probably.
Thank you so much for what you have done to provide this information to the public, and thanks for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us for this edition of Oneana's In Discussion. Join us again for future programs, and check us out on YouTube. I'm Gary Wickham. Thanks for watching.